So the idea then is if that ratio, the 1 to 1.618, is the perfect ratio for creating balance, proportion, scale, then you can apply it to all kinds of things, especially design. Now, I know when I go to the store, I am not going to say, oh, I want a couch that is 1 to 1.618 ratio to my room. I don't want to do that, but I can think about it in terms of this. If we do a little math, that ratio becomes 40 to 60. And those are the numbers I want you to remember. We grew up with the phrase, home is where the heart is. But our culture has shifted, and now the message is, home should be Pinterest perfect. I'm calling BS on that message. Home, it's not about the stuff, it's about the story. And whether you know it or not, your home is a reflection of you and is already saying something. So what is it that you want it to say? Hey, I'm Danny, a former first grade teacher turned home decorator. Going from a dual income to a single income so I could stay home with my babies meant budget, like ramen eating, Goodwill shopping budget. And I learned a few things along the way, like how to bring big style to your home without breaking the bank. And I'm sharing it all with you. Tips, tricks, decor, and design advice so you can learn to tell your story with your style, where you can start living free from the Pinterest perfect trap and start living a life of intention. Welcome to Fig and Farm at Home, where we design happy living and where it doesn't have to be perfect to be beautiful. I am a rule follower by nature, but I don't always think that is a good thing. And today we are talking about rules of home decorating. But these rules are meant to be guidelines. They are not meant to be confining, restrictive, or keep you in a decorating box. But rules can be safety nets. And I think in home decorating, especially when you are experimenting with these ideas, you're overwhelmed with so many choices. You're constantly questioning, is that couch too big or too small? Or how big should the area rug be? Sometimes rules can be really helpful. And so that is the heart of today's conversation. It is meant to be a really actually easy approach to keeping a number perspective when it comes to decorating. But the idea behind this approach has a really interesting story because there is a golden rule or maybe even a golden ratio of decorating that we're going to talk about today. And I'm going to get a little bit sciencey. So bear with me, I promise I'm going to get to the point. If you have heard the term Fibonacci Sequence, it is a mathematical sequence that has been around for, centuries, millenniaries. Is that a word? Millennia. It has been around for a very long time. Fibonacci was an Italian mathematician, also known as Leonardo of Pisa, and he made this concept a little bit mainstream. Now, mainstream in his book in 1202. That's a really long time ago. But he didn't discover it. He just brought the information to a little bit more mainstream because his work was based off of the Indian mathematician Pingala. Now, I don't know a whole lot of history about that, but I did a little bit of high-level research, and it was about 2,500 years ago. That is a very long time ago. So why is it important? Okay, here's why. Because the Fibonacci sequence, which I'll tell you about what it is in just a second, is the heart of the golden ratio rule in home decorating. Simply put, and in home decorating terms, Fibonacci sequence helps your home feel proportioned, scaled appropriately, and then of course aesthetically pleasing. But all those years ago, Fibonacci and then Pingala had no idea about that, right? They weren't thinking about home decorating, but they were noticing things in nature. And the things in nature that are scaled proportionally and aesthetically pleasing happen to be things like the petals of a flower and how when they starting at the center, they get bigger and bigger and bigger, and they make a ring around that flower until it is, of course, full grown. You can see the same effect in a pine cone, in pineapple, and the outside of a shell. If you think about looking at a shell, a spiral shell, and you can see the inner rings eventually, and you're starting at the very, very center, and they work their way out, and they spiral out, and they get larger and larger and larger and larger and larger. That essentially is a visual for the Fibonacci sequence. So mathematically, what that looks like is starting at 0 and 1. It is a series of numbers where each number is the sum of the preceding two numbers. So for example, if we started at 0 and 1, 0 and 1 added together is 1. 1 and 1 added together is 2. 1 and 2 added together is 3. 2 and 3 added together is 5, 5 and 3 added together is 8, and you get the idea. And it creates that visual then of that perfect spiral, which increases not symmetrically, but proportionally according to this ratio, this 1 to 1.618 ratio, which is the heart of the Fibonacci sequence. So the idea then is if that ratio, the 1 to 1.618, is the perfect ratio for creating balance, proportion, scale, then you can apply it to all kinds of things, especially design. Now, I know when I go to the store, I am not going to say, oh, I want a couch that is 1 to 1.618 ratio to my room. I don't want to do that, but I can think about it in terms of this. If we do a little math, that ratio becomes 40 to 60. And those are the numbers I want you to remember, 40 and 60. Now, if we think about 40% of the room, 60% of the room, together that equals 100% of the room, or whatever object we're decorating. So we're going to land there. In essence, the golden ratio founded on the Fibonacci sequence is 40 to 60. Now, I know if I were doing a little bit more math, that ratio would be 2/3. So remember either one of those, and let's talk about now the 5 things you can use this golden rule in order to decorate your home. Number 1, a cohesive color palette. You have heard me say, if you've been hanging around for a while, that I want to think about the colors I'm choosing to bring in a 60 to about a 40% ratio. Now that 40% I can be really creative with. I can turn that 40% into 30% and 10%. I can turn it into 30% and 5%, but here's what it looks like. I know that 60% of my color palette is going to be my foundational color, my main color. Maybe it is going to be a strong neutral. And then 30% of the color palette is going to be my primary accent color. 10% is my secondary accent color. There you have it. Right there is a Fibonacci sequence in real time, helping you to create a home that looks intentional, nuanced, fluid, cohesive, put together, whatever word you want to use in order to describe what a cohesive color palette can do for your home. That is the heart right there, the golden ratio, the golden rule. All right, you can use it for a color palette, but number 2, you can use it for scale and proportion. I often talk to my clients about this when we are picking things like artwork for above sofas, mirrors for above a vanity, even coffee tables for in front of a couch. When you think about scale and proportion here, we can go right back to that 2/3 rule, which is, again, 40-60. If I have an entryway table and I want a mirror that doesn't look too big and it doesn't look too small, I'm going to see, first of all, what the length of that piece of furniture is, and then I want the mirror or the artwork or whatever it is sitting above it, I want it to be about 2/3 the width of whatever it is sitting above. Same thing goes with a couch and a coffee table. If I have a 100-inch couch, will I want a 20-inch coffee table? I won't. It will look misproportioned and misaligned. Can I have 2 20-inch coffee tables? Sure, absolutely. That's going to be a lot better proportioned, or you can just get something that is a little bit bigger. But you want to think about utilizing those numbers and that simple formula in order to determine if the scale is proportionate to the room, to the item sitting next to it, to whatever it is that is taking up space here. The third way that I can use this golden ratio when I'm decorating is to think about the room layout. Now, if I were to remove everything from one room at a time, and I have a blank slate, if I were to think about bringing in furniture and only covering 60% of the floor, leaving 40% negative space, that would be an appropriate proportioned amount of furniture for that space. This is one of the things that we see often in our industry, where there's just too much furniture in one space, and then of course the too big furniture in one space. But just simply put, the layout, the floor plan, the amount of real estate pieces of furniture take up, you want to aim for about 60%. Now again, this is a guideline. It is not a hard and fast rule, but you can see pretty quickly that if you only had, we'll say 25% of your floor covered in furniture, something is going to feel a little bit off. It's going to feel a little bit misaligned and disproportionate to the room size. And the same thing goes with the converse. So if I had 70% of floor covered in furniture, I'm going to start feeling very quickly that my furniture is taking up space, taking up too much space, that it's a little bit too crowded and I have a little bit too much for the space I have allotted. So trying to stick to that 60%, 40% rule here is going to help you create that plenty of negative space to feel breathable. And of course, we can think about other things too, like the weight of furniture and all of that. We'll save that conversation for another day. But when you think about just the amount of real estate those pieces of furniture take up, you can mitigate any problems of over-furnishing or under-furnishing your home. The fourth one is when you're thinking about styling flat surfaces. Flat surfaces like entryway tables, dining tables, coffee tables, even bookshelves. When I think about a bookshelf, I want to use that 60-40 rule, that 2/3 ratio. And in my preference, my personal preference, I want to have 60% books and 40% accessories that accompany those. Personal effects, tchotchkes, whatever you want to call those. If I'm thinking about a coffee table styling, I actually want 40% coverage and 60% negative space. So a little bit opposite of what I'm using when I think about the floor layout. And I'm going to use that same ratio and that same idea when I'm thinking about entryway tables. I don't want lots of stuff on it. I want maybe about 40% coverage and 60% negative space. Number 5, just like when I'm choosing a color palette, if I'm wanting to bring in patterns and I want to try pattern mixing, I might think about using this ratio in order to determine how much of one pattern is too much or how much is a good thing. If I have 2 patterns, maybe I would want to follow that same rule like I would with the color palette. 60% of one pattern and 40% of another. Now that doesn't mean I am covering every surface with that pattern, but maybe 60% would be the wallpaper and 40% would be the textiles and the pillows on the couch. If I wanted to continue breaking up that 60-40 like I would a color palette, I can do 60-30 and 10 just like I would with a color palette. So perhaps I have the wallpaper, 60% coverage. Maybe I have 30% different pattern on the couch, and then I have 10% on as pillows. Now, if you're imagining something that looks a little Willy Wonka, here's what I want you to imagine. I'm picturing a beautifully wallpapered living room with some very neutral curtains, and then a couch that is a really subtle, very tame pattern. So maybe my pattern on the wall is a little bit more fun, a little bit more vibrant. I'm currently looking at my office pattern that is a Rifle Paper Company wallpaper. It is charcoal and it has some really dusty colors of peacock sitting on branches. It's with lots of roses and some berries. It's really very charming. Imagine that as the backdrop to the room, 60%. You have some creamy curtains. You have a couch. Maybe your couch is cream, but then maybe the chairs are the 30%, and the chairs have a really fun ticking pattern. So just a light stripe that's a little bit more masculine, contrasting well with the wallpaper. And then you have some really fun floral pillows, of course, in the same color palette, because we're not going really crazy here. But then you have another pattern that could be 10. Friend, if that sounded intriguing or a little confusing and you're thinking, I would love to give that a try, I just don't know how, or I need to have a little bit of courage, that is exactly what decorating SOS calls are for. I encourage you to book one. Start really loving the place that you're living. And if you want a jump start on that, we are wrapping up our registration for the Better Than Basics Bootcamp. Today is the last day to register for the boot camp that is happening next week. How is it different than other boot camps? Well, here's the difference. The difference is I'm not only giving you information for how you can understand your design style, I am proofreading what you submit so that I can give my 2 cents to say, actually, I kind of think your style has these design elements, these components, giving you the basic understanding of what it is you need to design your home around. We're not stopping there. We are creating a mood board. I'm teaching you how I do it so that you can do it too, so you can visualize all of the products you want to bring into your space before you purchase a single thing. And then I'm gifting you my redecorating roadmap, which is the secret sauce for how you know what to buy when you really want to just buy everything all at once. This is the tool I use all the time when I think, what is going to make the biggest impact first and what is going to be able to be waited on just a little bit longer. This is a gift for you when you register, but I'm not only giving it to you, I'm helping you create your own roadmap. So basically this 3-day workshop is an intensive hand-holding where I am having my eyes and my ears and my pulse on the project that you're trying to create, giving you a really clear understanding of what your aesthetic is so that you can make really wise, confident decisions. Friends, a decorating SOS call is $127 when you book it without being part of the membership, but here in this Better Than Basics Bootcamp, all of this is happening for $47. So if you want to snag that, there are still a few spots available. Go ahead and do that. Register tonight so that we can make sure that you walk away with a clear plan so that you can start creating a space that you love coming home to. That is the goal, friend, to create spaces that feel like a hug at the end of the day and that reflect you and your style. But if you don't know what your style is, come to the Better Than Basics Bootcamp. All right, friend, that is it for today. Short, sweet, to the point, and I will see you next week. Hey, real quick before you go, if you learned something new or found value in today's podcast, would you head over to iTunes to Fig and Farm at Home and leave a review and subscribe to the show? That would be awesome. And if you'd like to connect with my community of mamas who are learning to be intentional storytellers within their own homes, join us at bit.ly/design101 group. There's always more room at the table. See you soon.